So, hi everyone. Welcome to the Visionary Entertainment Leaders Conference. My name's Lisa Long, and Harrison Klein is an award-winning personal growth transformationalist, wealth and business growth consultant, whose mission is to personally change 1 million lives across the globe and help entrepreneurs, salespeople, executives, coaches, marketeers, and healers build multi-million-dollar companies and achieve the very best versions of themselves as they reach their personal and business fulfillment. Whether it's connecting to change makers around the world, providing personal growth for millionaires, or the mega rich challenge, Harrison is an action coach, constantly changing the rules of the game, inspiring value and collaboration while contributing to the well-being of the planet. Welcome, Harrison.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we've been friends for years on Facebook.
Many years now. It's been fun.
It is. I like Facebook.
And I enjoy what you do.
Oh, thank you. So, Harrison, can you tell us how you woke up?
You mean my
Your spiritual awakening.
spiritual awakening, not this morning, right? My story is somewhat interesting in a bizarre kind of way. I'm a miracle baby. At the age of about 4, my parents were Holocaust survivors, and they were in constant survival mode. So I grew up just right after World War II. And my parents came to this country without any money, just the clothes on their back and 2 kids, and no real marketable skills. My father studied to be a rabbi for a while. His education was interrupted. My mother was from a family of 6, and they had no money. Her father died when she was 6, and she was taken out of school and had to earn for the family at the age of 6 as an apprentice, and so on and so forth. So she really had very little education. So having come to this country in a state of, total disarray and confusion, and after having suffered all the heinous things that World War II brought to the Jews, she had been raped many times by the army and by other people like that in the ghetto in World War II. My father had been conscripted into the Russian army, and he suffered a wound in his leg, which never healed. As I grew up, my father and mother there's a destiny story. They hadn't seen each other for 8 years before the war till after the war. And they were obviously not the same people from before to after. And the survival mode in my house was always incredibly intense and full of fear and anger and resentment of everything. So my mother was a lot more aggressive than my father. My father was a soft-spoken guy, and my mother was aggressive and really pushed him very hard to do a lot of financial things and other things like that, which he was not terribly good at. Anyway, one day she was emasculating him in a very incredibly vicious way. I was about 4 or 5 years old. I don't remember how old exactly I was, but 4 or 5 years old. And he lost it for the first time and only time that I ever saw this happen in my life. But she emasculated him so intensely that he lost it, and he grabbed her by the throat, put her up against the wall. And it was that moment in which having grown up in this heavy vibration of difficulty and negativity and everything else, at that moment I decided I didn't want to live. And so I didn't want to see this. I didn't want to know of any of this kind of stuff. And at that moment I retreated into what now would be called autism. And I was in that state for 23 years. I was autistic for 23 years. I hardly had a conversation with anybody till I was almost 30 years old. I was a good student. I could read, but anything that was animated was totally difficult for me. and I couldn't come in contact with people. I would feel stabbing pains, Eckhart Tolle calls a pain body. So I'd feel stabbing pains in my ribs when anybody would be within about 6 feet of me. I experienced a foggy vision. So what I was seeing wasn't what everybody else was seeing. There was no clarity. It was a moving silhouette type situation. My hearing was like with a bad cell phone, and I could only hear about every third word. And I was trying to piece together what people said at every conversation and couldn't do it. So it was a very difficult thing in the autism, and it was a hellish experience. And my awareness was shut down, and I was quite frigid in terms of anything having to do with human contact or anything that was animated, animal contact, anything like that. So at the age of about 28, I was sitting I actually entered the artistic field because I wanted to increase my awareness. So at the age of about 28, I was sitting in an overstuffed chair in Cleveland, Ohio, about 2:30 in the morning. And without warning, I was like yanked out of my body. My consciousness was yanked out of my body. I was sent spinning through the universe at a velocity fast.
I hear you.
I was watching planets birth and die. I was watching galaxies spin. I heard choirs, or what I now interpret as choirs of angels singing in the background. And this incredible clouds coming at me, dust coming at me, colors coming at me, patterns coming at me, and I was just still moving. So it was the eruption of 28 years of suppressed emotion, like a big bang. And it was going through this velocity of awareness that I had never known. And all of my life came flooding in. And then that awakening, which I would now call an awakening, I call it a white light experience. When I landed back in my body, gave me additional powers that I had never even conceived of. I didn't believe in God. I didn't know anything prior to those moments. I was clairvoyant. I was clairaudient. I was clairsentient. I had ability to see energy. I saw auras, and I saw the pulsations of the colors around me, vibrations of reds, greens, yellows, blues. They were all vibrating at different speeds. I saw translucently through a lot of things that were opaque. I could see inside some people's bodies. I could see inside of some other kinds of opaque things that were going on. And my life has never been the same. So from that moment on, 28 years, I was one person. And after that, I was a totally different human being. And so my life totally changed. And I became in connection with guides and source. And they pretty much told me that this was my mission in life, and that what I had gone through in the autistic stage was really a green beret or ninja training so that I could help people come to these same realizations in their own life.
Harrison, that's totally my my late partner, Michael McAvoy. He said for him, it was like trying to live through cotton. It was like there was cotton all the way around him.
Yeah.
And he couldn't feel the world, and he couldn't interact very much with the world. And
I had
it was simple. Well, yeah, but like at a normal, I mean, you're in a different world. You're in your own little world. They used to tell me I was in my own little world. I was. Now I'm back. I'm back to my own little world, and it's a great big world. But and he went through something similar. He became like an awakened Edgar Casey, and after I saw you, you always reminded me of him because he was so awake and had a divorce helped him get through it. And for me, a divorce too, and angel visits and stuff. But I could always hear my guides, but then I became denser and denser over time as I externalized my power onto other people, like making my husband happy and stuff like that. And then that was before Michael. And then the angels came, and I had a similar experience where all at once my whole world shifted. But it literally took me, I didn't have the experience where all at once I was clear that you did. I had my powers turn on, but I still had to clear a bunch of limited beliefs and stuff over time to get myself to another level.
Yeah, it's all mastery. After you come into an awakening, basically what you're doing is you're able to experience your subconscious. And when your subconscious brings things forward, basically you know what to clear and what not to clear, what the mind is for, when to use it, when to shut it down, et cetera, et cetera. And you release all the things that don't serve you because it's completely apparent to you through the subconscious coming conscious. So the experience was that communication became not only clear, but it became self-luminous. And what we saw was really reflections of ourselves, and that became obvious and visceral. So every being is all the same being with just different vibrational tones reflecting back to us what's going on in our subconscious. And then once we become conscious, we're seeing what's going on exactly as it is. So I had little connection with people till that moment. My entire conversational range up until the time that I had that experience was how much is this and what do I have to do here? And that's about it. I didn't participate in school. I didn't participate in work. I did labor jobs when I was still a grown man, but I did labor jobs where I didn't have to communicate with anybody. They just said, okay, go do this, go nail these boards to this house, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
pretty
I
much
kind of did
what
that
I lived on.
too. I felt like I was just a worker and that's all I could do.
So
I call it head
well,
down and ass up because when you're asleep, you're just working all the time and you don't have time to think about concepts like these, that's why I'm working to bring it into the entertainment industry in a chunked down way. And that's the trick, because how do you put little scenes and things in the movies and in your work? And even if it's next time, I'm going to have gaming people on too. I invited some this time, but they didn't get back to me at time because the movies in the gaming industry are all merging. And the kids know a lot of this stuff. They're just conscious of it because they came in that way. But how do we put little awakening concepts into movies? And that's why your speech about how we're literally living the hero's journey. I realized that years ago. I thought, God, when I read it, I thought, oh, I'm doing this. This is my journey.
It's pretty much everybody's journey who comes into some form of an awakening. And it gives purpose to life once you begin to understand it. The hero's journey always starts with a sense of dissatisfaction, a sense of disassociation with the world. And it always starts with what's wrong in the world and what's wrong in my life and what's wrong with my environment. And then it moves into disassociation with that because you can no longer tolerate it. And of course, what happens when you get disassociated is that the experience adversity becomes dramatic, much more dramatic. It's already dramatic in the fact of what's wrong, but then you have to navigate into a world. Once you leave the world, you have to navigate in a world nothing about. And that is very stressful. And so going through that process is the place where we begin to find our real competence. We begin to see how to address the issues that are coming at us as opposed to just reacting to them. And we are desperate to get out of that space. And so as we become more and more competent at handling those adversities, we have the abilities to open up not only ourselves, but then we can communicate that in a different way. And suddenly where everything was convergent, we unfold. And then the world, once we unfold, the world gives us everything we want because we have gone through the journey. We have gone through the process of, what it takes to awaken to all the visceral and the spiritual and all the realms of the shamanistic realms and other things like that. So I think as far as movies are concerned and putting scenes in there, I think there's been a lot of hallucinatory type directing that goes on when you're in the movies, and hallucinations are depicted in particular ways. I was watching Doors, I think 2 nights ago, with the Oliver Stone thing, and Jim Morrison had many visions of him being in the Indian world and in the shamanic world, and he portrayed it as shifting scenes of the exact same thing. So you had overlaps of different shifting scenes, and that is somewhat autistic. You actually getting overlapped of shifting things going on. You're really in the autism world. You're receiving stimulus from what, I don't know, is woo-woo for most people, but what the shamanic realms know as parallel universes. And so you're getting stimuluses that you can't handle because they're coming so fast and they're shifting. And so in the movies, I watched a thing about Van Gogh the other night too, and he was having visions like that. So the computer stuff and the colors and the action shifting back and forth in a non-steady way is part of what happens when we move into these other realms. We begin to experience things a little bit differently than we did before, which is that density we were talking about. And
I just had an insight when you were talking about the hero's journey, where there's an Egyptian journey too. The ancient Egyptians had where you start out here and then you become the crier, where you become the seeker and then you become the crier. So you're buying all these books in our terms and you're reading everything, because all at once you're like, oh, there's something here. And then you become the crier where, oh, you tell everybody. And then you become, there's a few levels in between, but you become the master. And when I was listening to you as the hero's journey, the first arc seems like the seeker from the Egyptian. And then you go to, and then you're dealing with things in the world because you're still asleep. But instead of reacting, you're starting to think about how can I make this better or deal with it, but you don't really understand that it's your beliefs that are limiting you. So you're trying to deal with the people in the world. And then the second act is more like, oh, it gets desperate. It gets more desperate. And then you have a breakthrough and you realize you're creating it. And then you change you, and then your life changes. So that was a great, I hadn't had that before. That when you were talking, I got that download. I'm like, wow, that's cool.
When the intensity gets too great, you give up and you surrender to what is happening. And then you begin to see it for the real part of what it is, rather than the suffering, which is all misperception that we experience. So we're taught that everything is as it seems. Nothing is as it seems, really. Imagination, we're taught that imagination is unreal, when in fact imagination is the core of all reality. We're taught that things are this and that, when in fact they're not. We're taught that we know a bunch of stuff, and we think we know a bunch of stuff. We don't know anything about what a lot of the truth is, and especially when we're dense. Nothing is as it seems. Nothing is the way it is until you're able to release all that misperception. And those misperceptions are what we're trained into from the time we're young. We're trained into criticism. We're trained into aggression. We're trained into reaction. We're trained into all these dark forces. And
survival. I was trained into just day-to-day survival.
Me too. And I didn't have a clue as to what was really the truth about things. All I had was this massive experience of resistance. In the autistic state, it's a gigantic no. They tell me I have to move from here to here. My internal said no. They tell me I have to take on this job. No. They tell me I am like this. No, I'm not. It's just a constant no and resistance to everything. And then you have to smile and pretend like it's okay. And so you disassociate from yourself. You get far away from that. And then what comes in was a bunch of stimuluses that you have no clue, because things are shifting and you can't keep up with them. One of the things that I realized right before I had my white light experience was that what I was perceiving was at least 1 to 2 seconds later than what was going on. And that's one of the ways that actually helped me to shift into the new state, was that I was so far behind of what was actually going on. And everything that I saw was a reflection, or at least seconds later, of processing of what was going on, as opposed to what was really going on in my life in the moment. Then when I surrendered to the intensity of the pain, I said, okay, give me the pain, you can kill me and do whatever you want to do, all that kind of stuff, is when I had my white light experience. And then I said, as this stuff was coming in, I said, what if this is just one form of love? What if this is love? And at that moment is when I had my white light experience. At the moment, it was a surrender, and it was a great surrender to what is. And then I became very spiritual. From that point on, I began to look at, I had this great knowing of a number of things. I had a great sense of involvement and power in the universe. I had this amazing sense of no time, where time and space collapsed into a single point in the only now. And then I began to learn how to use the illusion rather than the illusion using me. I began to come into the place of, how do I create from this place? How do I create? Because my real desire was to create. And I saw that I was already creating, but I wanted to create deliberately and volitionally in a new way. And I began to learn how to create using my thoughts. I began to learn how to create using my actions, how to understand what the mind was really for, when to open it up, when to shut it down, all that. And then,
you also
I
learned to believe in yourself. That's the main thing. When did you get that? I'm worthy. When did you get was it right in that white light experience? Did you keep that? Did you maintain that?
That white light experience destroyed the self. There was no self. I just became pure awareness at that point.
But you maintained it, because I've had white light experiences early on. I had one in the shower when I was like 23, where all at once I was pondering Zen and bones. Once was the sound of one hand clapping, and your mind just shuts off. And I ended up as all that is, and I knew everything. I just knew everything. And then I came back into my body, and it took me about 8 years or so to become conscious of what I knew. I didn't maintain that consciousness. And then when I became conscious of it, it was like, I know everything, and it's all just a reflection of my thoughts. That's what I got while I was up there, but I didn't quite get, because I went back in and got densed out. I was still dense in my body. So you were just blasted clear. That's amazing.
It was like being a cannon, yeah. It was like standing on the platform of a train station and the Japanese bullet train going by at 200 miles an hour, and then grabbing onto a rail and trying to hold on. So the side flapping, holding on to this rail, this gigantic amount of energy that has pierced and taken my body for a ride.
Yeah, I get, mine was more stages. I did have that when I was in Hawaii after my divorce, and the angels visited us. I talked about it earlier, but it was like total blasted clear for days. And then I realized my whole house was like an altar, because I had marble floors, waterfall pool over the whole Kona coast. And I built it like an altar. I had an altar in my room and I kept asking for spirit. And then I was visited by high-level masters. One guy that was in Shirley MacLaine's book.
Kevin Ryerson?
No, but I met him. I went on an event with him, a Great Pyramid Channeling Conference, Kevin Ryerson. But this was the Man of Light, Mauricio. Okay. And he's on my website. If you go to enlightenedlifeentertainment.com, you can see they actually made a documentary. But he had light shooting out of his body. I had these huge masters visiting me, and my mind was having a hard time. He came for 3 days and worked on people, and I checked his shirt. His shirt was real tight, looking for wires. And our electric bill was really high in Hawaii. So I haven't checked my electric bill after. But he was in he put down we borrowed a table for him, and he worked on people for 3 nights in my bedroom. And it was on a cliff over the coast, but I could stand out on the pool deck, and it looked like a cop car. The lights on a cop car were in my bedroom. And yeah. And he worked on me, and he like put his thumb here, and so energy. He was, I forget where he's from, but anyway, the light just went, and it just hot as could be. And the whole room just He worked on me 3 times, but my mind was still having a hard time grasping it till I went outside and we were saying last night we were saying goodbye to him and his wife, Kimberly, and he coughed. And it was dark. And he coughed getting into his rental car, and light shot out his mouth and his ears. And they even said it shoots out when he farts. He's on the other side now. He's amazing. He's one of my guides. Anyway, there's a documentary on my website if you want to check it out. But there's some real people on this planet that are just, they're here, they're bringing it in.
Physics has shown right now that the average person's heart shoots about 20 to 50 photons of light per second out of their chest cavity. The awakened people who are highly advanced and in evolved states of mind, they have 100,000 or more photons of light shooting out of them every second. So
that's why you're on.
Yeah.
I can feel it. I just love you. You're so good. And you're so high level, and you're constantly on Facebook encouraging people to
Well, part of the trip is that as you become better at who you are, you need to share that. It's an obligation. It's a voluntary obligation. People who evolve themselves need to share who they are. And that's just the most natural thing that people can do between each other, is to trade information and to trade experiences. And to experience, that's what we were as a species honed for, to train this communication between all of us, to understand that we're all this one being, 8 billion hearts out of one flame. And we're just one small flame running through the fire, all of us. And the fire is all of us. We're all part of the same fire. Pure desire.
Yeah, and we're all, I tell people, it's like we're in a video game. And the video game is a very advanced video game. And you have to be a master to be here because it's so dense. And we dived in and we're like, oh, I'll go play that video game on Earth. And we get here and we're like, oh shit. What'd you say?
You're trying to drive in India. You're in the middle of
the traffic.
Swarms of bees and all that kind of stuff. But it's totally doable, and it just is. That's the fun of it. You have to come into the attitude of, this is really enjoyable and really fun. And I've been having a blast for 45 years.
You're one of the lucky ones, or not but you got there. And that's what I want to put into the movies, like behind your head.
Yeah.
You've got superheroes. Yeah. And the superheroes are a symbol for people to know that they have an internal superhero.
Yeah.
And the kids know that. It gives you hope.
Yeah, we are all aggregates of all these powers, and we actually trade these powers between ourselves at different points in our lives. So it's really good stuff. And the evolution of coming into these superpower things, we only change in 4 ways. We only come into these higher spaces in 4 ways. Everything is a derivative of these 4 ways. One is your self-image. So as you see yourself as a superhero, your self-image changes. As you see yourself as a higher portion or evolved human being, your self-image change. We cannot change the self-image we currently have. That's an impossibility. But the difference for change is that we create a whole brand new self-image. So the new self-image is not like the old self-image. So once we have a self-image, it's embedded and programs us. But the new self-image can then dissolve the old self-image, because the higher vibration dissolves the lower vibration each time. When you're happy, you don't think about being sad. When you're wealthy, you don't think about being poor. Those things don't enter your mind. So self-image is one way to change. Another way to change is your belief system. So as you change your beliefs, your world changes. Every single belief is a shift in the universe. Every single change of belief is a shift in the entire universe, and is a ripple effect out. So every time you change your belief system, you come into a higher state or you come into a lower state. But most people like to go into the higher state, so it feels better to go. So you feel better. As you release this density, it feels easy. It feels, kind of feels weightless. And so the third way to change is the way that I changed from that really dense, dark place of autism, is through shock. You come through shock. When you get to the point of where you can take no longer and you either want to live or die, or you want to die, the shock opens you up to making a change. You have to become a different person or get off of this physical plane. So the shock changes you. That's why a lot of people go who have near-death experiences and stuff, they have new enlightened consciousnesses afterwards. And then the fourth way is the way that most in the last 30 or 40 years, people have begun to realize, and that's inspiration. So you take increments of inspiration and you move through that, and you can change through that. And eventually there comes a point where it becomes cumulative inside of the awareness that you have, and then it opens you up into a whole new space. So the truth, the seeker, the whole thing. And what we begin to realize the moment we come into an awakening is that what we see, what we experience, and what is experienced are all the same thing, and they're all us. So there's no difference between any of it. And Western religions are about behavior. Eastern religions are about consciousness. And now there's coming this merging. There's coming this awakening, this transitioning into the merger of those two ideas, behavior and consciousness coming together, and not having the divisions that it has had for the last 7,000 years.
Well, even the scientists are starting to come out of their boxes, right?
100%. I mean,
Quantum physics and
exactly. And I believe quantum physics is the behavior of spirit, really, when you come down to it. Most people believe quantum physics was started with the idea that we could try to see what was beneath the level of the smallest particle that we believed exists, which was the atom at a certain point. And then we found that there were neutrons, protons, electrons. We found that there were leptons and quarks and other kinds of things beneath the level of the atom. We found that everything was vibrational and nothing stays. And then it's coming from, where is this space and what is this vibration coming from? It's pure, it's a sea of pure intelligence and pure spirit. And it is the behavior of spirit from which everything emerges. It has to do with the eternalness of who we are. And it has to do with the intentions of that eternalness. And so as we open ourselves up to experience these new adventures, the hero's journey, as we find these adventures, we open ourselves up to the reception of not only what is, but the reception of what we want. And we create, we sculpt through the thoughts of our mind. Every time we use the words I am, it's a signal to the universe, to whatever follows that word. I am happy, I am sad, I'm good, I am bad, I am a great provider, I'm a terrible husband, whatever you use the words I am, it's a signal to the universe to create that reality for you. And so people use the I ams really stupidly, most of them, because they're about negative
they
stuff.
don't know any better.
They don't know any better, and nobody teaches you this.
And there are a lot of people do, but you don't, they just think we're airy fairies.
Yeah. Well,
if they're on a lower dimension, we're just going to be totally too far out of their box.
Dimensions can't see the higher dimensions.
That's right. Or it's scared of them, right? Because our light brings up their issues, and then they see their issues and think it's us.
But yeah, and good one. Here's the beauty of that whole process, is that whatever dimension you think you're in, you're always a dimension higher, because you could never know the dimension you're in without having a perspective on it. So you're always one dimension higher than the dimension. That's an incredible thing. The first dimension in mathematics is a point, right? Me, my wants, my needs, my desires, my experiences. Second dimension is what? It's a line, which is a bunch of points which are right next to each other. So who's on this side? Who's on that side of me? My family, my not my family, my friends, my not my friends, my opinions, my anti-opinions, so on and so forth. That's the second dimension of evolution. Third dimension is the one most of us live in on this plane, which is solidity, or the idea of opaque density. And that is, you have height, width, and depth, right? The height is the ability to see a little bit into the future, to the end of your life, or partially to the end of your life, or back to the beginning of your life. And the width is the line. So you see who's on all sides of you, who are you with, and who's with you and who's not with you. And then the me is, what are my needs, my desires, so on and so forth. The fourth dimension is time. Time is the fourth dimension, and that is the illusion, and it is the bridge between heaven and earth. It's really a way station wave stage, so between the celestial and the physical and the base. And so once we become able to grasp the malleability of time, we open ourselves up to the next dimensions, which we cannot do until the fourth dimension. We can't even begin to open ourselves up until we're in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is the one whereby, the more successful you are at mastering yourself, or the more successful you are in the world, the smaller your increments of time are delineated. A guy who's the CEO of, Apple, you get 3 to 5 minutes with him if you want to sell him something, or you get 15 minutes. But the guy who's homeless on the street, he has so much time he can't fill it, doesn't know what to do. He's just totally lost going here. So time, and you know that when you're happy, time moves very quickly. When you're sad or when you're depressed or whatever, it just slows down and dramatically. And it's painful when it slows down too much. So after you hit the fourth dimension, after you make that breakthrough into the area above the fourth dimension, that's the light dimension. Now you come into light. What does light do? It illuminates everything that's dark, right? You put a light into a room and it illuminates whatever it shines at. So now you can see things that were invisible to you in the other dimensions. And that becomes energy pulsations or whatever it is, whatever your particular way of dealing with things are. From there, you go on to what do you do with this? And you become extremely creative, things that you've never been taught, you've never seen, nobody's ever shown you. And you become a signature human being. You become so unique that everybody recognizes your uniqueness. And so do you recognize that you are an imprint, an imprinting factor on the world. And then from there, what does your creativity do? It becomes influential. So whatever you create becomes influential, and it's like an author who writes a book, or a painter who paints a painting that goes around the world. Picasso did one painting, it's gone around the world 85 million times and influenced 85 million people. An author writes a book, influences 250,000 people he's never met, he's never seen, never ever will meet, can never have contact with, and yet his energy in writing that will make an impact on other people. It will make an impact sometimes to totally change their lives. So the influential dimension is the next one. And then you go into your space of, the angelic realms, the shamanic realms, the galactic realms, all these other things, astral travel, whatever you want to call it, lucid dreaming.
Fun
stuff.
You're so clear. I've never heard anybody put it in such a clear way about the dimensions and everything. It's
well, my parents owned the Windex.
They put the mud on the windshield and your higher self cleared it off. And so that made you rubber band into a higher place. I was talking about that earlier. When you come from deep darkness, when you finally let go, you shoot into great light.
That's right.
And that's what you did. You took on, you're like, oh, I'll go down there and take on all this crap. And then when you finally let it go, you just went, and that's so amazing.
A skyscraper that has to be dug, the foundation has to be as deep as the height of the skyscraper. So what you're doing when you go into the darkness and you go deep is you're exploring your feelings. You're exploring what your relationship is to all things. That's the exploration. And you're always going to find yourself not good enough, short. So you go deeper and you find what's wrong, and you're really exploring your feelings, or the feelings are just your vibration and your relationship to all of the things. It shuts down your awareness, but it keeps you locked into the what is the me? What is that me portion of you? What is the real me? So the two most important questions on the planet are, who am I and what am I feeling at this given point? And statistics have now shown that over 56% of the people on the earth cannot identify the emotion they're in at the time that they're in it. They can identify it sometimes in reflection, but they can't identify it while they're in it. So
yeah, the record's playing. Their mind is just caught in a loop, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they can't get out of it.
Yeah, and the distance is your heart is emitting photons, of light. That's what we are, nothing but light and energy and information, intelligence. It's all about emitting this light, as you were talking about. And yes, and you can see light coming out of people's mouths. You can see, and the vision of what was once dense to you turns into something totally different as you evolve through the scale of these dimensional things.
And you get such great. That's the wow I want to put in movies. like
Yeah.
Matrix and stuff, like where you're watching it and all at once your mind goes, wow. You can feel
Yeah.
your expansion. You just
Yeah.
expanded. And I'm sure a lot of people have felt that listening to you, Harrison. This has been great. Can you give us your free offer?
I'm going to offer a free 15-minute consultation to anybody who wants it.
Okay, here's that.
We have one problem, one solution is really the easiest way to do something, unless you just want to get to know me for 15 minutes. Yeah, happy to address anything that anybody needs to go through or wants to go through. And when you're in up until the fourth dimension, everything that you do is as on a horizontal plane. So that you're on what's like me, what's not like me. But when you break through the fourth dimension into the fifth, you have perspective. You go into the vertical dimensions. And what my purpose is, I want to take people into total vertical perspective so that they can see things from new angles and easily move between all those dimensions at will. So it's a beautiful thing, and I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to help people start that journey, find out more about that journey, be in that journey, or just experience whatever it is that they feel that they need to experience to get there. So all that is, it's a beautiful thing.
That's such a gift, Harrison. I think you're a gift, but that's one of the things I really had to go through, is realizing my value.
I was totally humbled until I was 28 years old. I mean, everything was humiliating to me about me. So then I said, oh my God, I have something to say. Oh my God, I have something I can give. Suddenly I'm a different human being. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, and
we all do. I'm not any.
Yeah, you're older than I am a little bit, and it was denser then. So people our age, we had to work a little harder to get through, and now the young kids are just, oh yeah, I know that.
Yeah. And everything is opening up. So we are coming to a tipping point on this planet. The transition is pretty dramatic right now, especially I believe that COVID was here for a purpose. And the purpose that COVID is here for is that to introspection, to find out what we truly feel about our values, about our education, about our consciousness, and about our relationships. And that is an opening thing. In the past 7,000 years, every time a culture has changed, it's been through the aspect of war. This is the first time. So I believe that Source orchestrates all this stuff, and I think it knows what it's doing.
Oh, totally.
I believe it knows what it's doing. So it's all about making the entire divisions become unified. So unity consciousness in every way. And so when you hit this unity consciousness experience, it becomes a gift to the whole world. And then all the things that are different than what you thought they were become enlightening, if you will, or they come to the point of where you and it trade light. So anytime you do a performance like a movie or a stage act or whatever, you're trading energy with the audience. So the energy trade is really the important thing, and that's what happens. And then when you begin to influence audiences, you start into a whole new era of yourself, and the self becomes the no self except for energy and information. And that becomes a beautiful space, and it's pure ecstasy in a way. I've been in bliss. I hardly ever have a down moment, and if I do, something really dramatic has to happen, and then I'm recalibrated. I don't stay in anything down longer than about 40 or 50 minutes probably. And if it's really dramatic, like somebody dying that's close to me, it's a day or two before I can recalibrate. But the whole recalibration, the whole thing is to be in a steady state of well-being. And then from the well-being, the roller coaster ride is fun, as opposed to scary from the not well-being.
Yeah, I couldn't have done this 6 months ago. I would have been too scared. I cleared something. Forbes helped me, and she's on next at noon. And I couldn't go there. I tried. I kept trying. I was one of the first psychics on the internet in '95, and I got a lot of flack for that. I got emails you wouldn't believe that I was going to burn in hell forever.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are pretty dense in that way. They're pretty rigid in that way.
That was '95, so I think things have
It,
gotten a
it
lot
doesn't
better.
matter when you're fundamental and literal. It's a whole other ball game, totally.
Yeah, it's dense.
It's in very based emotion dimensions. When you're that dark about things, it's the me, it's my needs, my wants, my desires, and anything that's anything different than my needs, my wants, my desires becomes an enemy or the not me and threatening to me. Of Course in Miracles says nothing real can be threatened and nothing threatened can be real. That's pretty true. You can say a lot of things to me that would absolutely enrage a whole lot of other people, and I find them absurdly funny.
Yeah.
So,
And
so,
when you're at first, it'll hit you. And then when you get transparent, it's funny as the energy hits, bounces. And then
yeah,
after that, it just goes through. You don't even notice it. It's
yeah,
like,
it's just,
and it's just like watching a play. I think a lot of things are funny.
I love that God has a terrific sense of humor because think about all the shit he has to listen to every day. He has a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's totally, yeah.
It's
And
my mind. Even when I'm big, my mind comprehends, but it comprehends at the bigness. It doesn't comprehend the details. And then
right,
when we're here, we're comprehending the details.
well, we're going through the details.
Yeah, we're creating the details and experiencing them. It's so this is the fun part. That part feels like and this part's okay, let's create something.
Let's play. Alan Watts did this thing a long time ago, which I have never forgotten, and I absolutely agree with 100%. He said, basically, the universe has no ambition. It's not going anywhere. It's not meant to do anything. It's just infinite. What is something that has no ambition? It doesn't have to accomplish anything do. It plays. So that's what the universe does, is it plays. So it creates these roles of all of us. It creates the roles of experience, and it just plays with the absurdity of all those things.
I can feel that. I feel the total alignment with that, Harrison. This has
it's
been
really
great. Thank you. We're going to go on a 5-minute break, and then I'll talk for a little while. Oh, Holly, you have a question?
Yeah, Lisa, thank you. Yeah, Harrison, I was trying to keep up writing all the wonderful things you were saying. You were going so fast. Okay, you said something earlier. It said nothing is as it seems unless it's something about perception, and I missed it. Nothing is as it seems unless.
No, did I say it? Did I use the word unless?
Something about the way it's perceived, or something, unless its perception is changed. And then you said we are all wired to see, hear, and respond to things. And I missed it. No, it was so good, and I wanted to write it down.
Everything, we believe that everything is as it seems, when in fact nothing is as it seems. There are different levels of understanding and things. And I guess the denser you are, you hit on the events. The less dense you are, you hit on the perspective of that thing. What is the perspective of it? And we're in the, is it this way or not this way? And that's what the denseness does. It makes you explore that inside of yourself. What's your relationship to what is this event? But from the perspective, you say, okay, this is what this means. You have already attached a meaning to something. And in that meaning, that becomes the way that your reality begins to play out. It becomes a certain kind of magic in that way. The awakening is the magic. Every time when you break through the fourth dimension, from that point on, your life is total magic. That doesn't mean you don't have problems, you don't have ups and downs, although you have very dramatically less up and downs than other people. Beneath the fourth dimension, everything is an issue to be resolved. At the fourth dimension, and this is what awakened the Buddha basically, was that at the fourth dimension, he broke through and he saw that there was a simultaneity of all things, which was the collapse of time and space. And so that everything is simultaneous. So when you're thinking about buying a car, there's somebody out there simultaneously connected to you that's thinking about designing a car, thinking about selling a car, thinking about fixing a car, thinking about driving in a car, thinking about what kind of car, and they're all connected to you. which is how anything that you think of happens to come to the right place and by law of attraction comes to you. Western medicine doesn't acknowledge spirit in healing. It's starting to now, with alternatives coming into mainstream at this point. But there's so many industries that don't acknowledge the presence of spirit and how all that works. And as you begin to explore and find, almost everything has some illusory factor to it. How do we penetrate through the illusion? We look directly. We don't look through an idea. We look through no concept, but we look at directly and then see what it is. As we see what it is, then it doesn't have to affect us, or we choose how it affects us, as opposed to us having a knee-jerk reaction.
That's it.
Am I answering
Yes, you hit it at the end.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So thank you,
Okay.
Harrison. And
My great pleasure to be here.
I hope you hang on. 'Cause Forbes, right?
I do know Forbes. Yeah, we just recently met. But, she's amazing, and I love her. So yeah, Forbes is coming on. Is Forbes on
No, not yet.
already?
She's
Okay.
got a busy schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
So, but I promised everybody a little break for 5 minutes.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
we'll be
so
back in a minute. I'll leave you on spotlight for a minute.
all right. You pulled some nice stuff out of me, so that's cool.
Yeah, it was great. I love high-level conversation because
thanks.
then our higher selves can play.
Yeah, we all communicate with our higher selves, but what's really fun is when you know your higher self and you can have your higher self communicate with somebody else's higher self, even when they don't know it.
Well, and it brings us all up.
Yeah,
It takes everybody up in the group because their higher selves all join in too. They're like, "Oh, let's go! This will be fun."
Yeah. There's a story about two Confederate soldiers on a battlefield, and they actually end up killing each other, and then their souls emerge from their bodies at the same time. They look at each other, they high five each other, says, "That was fun. Let's do it again."
Yeah. I tell people to clear when some people will call me and they'll be like, I've been with this person a long time. I'm always drawn back to them and I don't know why we don't get along. I don't know why. And I said, it's because in a past life you vowed to always love them.
Oh, there you go.
And so I have people remove vows and agreements from all, because the universe doesn't know lifetimes.
No,
It knows,
there is no.
so when you make a vow, it's just, yeah. So I'm very careful about that.
It can go on beyond one body. Yes, that's true. Yes, absolutely.
Is that what it means when my mom says you married your grandfather and my
Yeah.
husband? Is that what that
Could be.
means? Okay.
Or it could just be he has genetic similarities
Interesting.
that she recognizes.
Well, we're totally connected to our ancestry. And this body is simply a conglomeration of memories and a density of memories. And when I had my awakening, one of the realizations that my guides showed me basically was that awakening was liberated 6 generations back from my family's, my ancestors, so that awakening alone liberated 6 generations back. And I come from Jewish Holocaust survivors, and that's 6 generations of pretty bad suffering, and especially they grew up in Poland, there were the pogroms, and people were being beaten and raped for no reason whatsoever. Horses coming into villages and killing people just for no reason, like very tribal and very primal kinds of stuff. And all that density that happened and that closed people down. I liberated 6 generations of my families and everybody on those 6 generations. So not only the people that were directly related to me, but their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, their siblings, all those kinds of things. And that's just one awakening. Think of what happens when everybody gets awakened, or when 15 people get awakening, or 100 people get awakened. Holy shit, what a ripple that is.
And it's not only them, because you actually transmute your DNA to a different frequency, and
that's right,
goes out. And so just even on Zoom, people are absorbing this. So everybody in your town is transformed. Everybody, and it depends how big your light is, but you're literally transforming everybody on the world. So it's multidimensional, not only through your DNA. I'm sure you know.
When you change, everything changes. The
Yeah.
entire world around you changes. Yes, 100%.
That's what it means when somebody says you come into a room and you light up the room. The whole room is just lit up.
It's true.
That's
Yeah,
what that means.
Yeah.
I can walk into a restaurant and I can know whether or not the management has been abusing the servers and the cooks and all that. I can absolutely feel it.
I'll be right back. I'll leave you on.
Yeah, with no hesitation on my part. I absolutely know that. I absolutely know what the cultural environment is in that restaurant. Or I walk into a room where there's a lot of people working, and I know what some of their issues are immediately. I don't have to ask them. I just know. And sometimes when I do ask, just to validate, it's about right about 100% of the time. So, that's fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. How do you do that to where you feel like you might not? Do you ever feel like you're intruding, or do you present it in a way that people connect and they open up to you because you've hit something in them which makes them open up to you?
Yeah, I don't feel I'm intruding. And if it feels like there's sensitivity around something, yes, it is a sixth sense. If there's sensitivity around stuff, I can sense that. I don't go there with them. The wise man doesn't spill everything out all at once. He knows what can be said and what cannot be said at different times. If somebody's really dense and they want to, and they're in some form of abuse, sometimes I don't want to do anything with them. I want to let them resolve it themselves, because that's the way that we open up, is through discovery. There are two rabbis who deal with people who have issues. One rabbi helps them resolve the problem. The other rabbi says, let them go through it, because when they discover it, they'll always have it. It's an old story about the wisdom of particular rabbis. So the greater rabbi says, let them go through it, because their discovery will be the greatest fortune that they have. If you help them resolve it, if you give them the answer, they may have a short-term response and maybe relief, but they may not make it, but they may not understand it themselves, and they won't get the bigger picture embedded. So there's a fine line between all that, and you have to know, or at least you have to feel when that fine line is where it's at. Is Forbes on?
Not yet. I learned a long time ago. I told her 12:15. I learned a long time ago that if somebody's crying and releasing, because that's a good thing, they're releasing and you go hug them, you stop their process.
Oh,
They're in the middle
okay.
of they're in the middle of releasing in a process, and if you hug them, the energy changes.
Okay.
So if you just let them,
crying opens up the heart. Crying opens up the heart. I
yeah,
don't know.
it does.
Yeah, it's a complete heart opener. So
And some movies open up the heart. Some movies, you're just sitting there with tears running down your face, and it's like that really heals people. But I don't usually watch. A lot of those are romantic, or I like sci-fi.
Oh, and a lot of the tear jerkers are not there. They pull sympathy tears from you as opposed to joy tears from you. The whole thing, there's so many movies out there that have big impact because people get immersed in the momentum of the story as opposed to the framework of seeing the whole picture. So when I'm in a movie with people who are in the immersion of things, they're following the story, and it goes, and the story takes them along into a new realm of being. When I'm in a movie by myself, I see a lot more than just what is the story that's going on the screen. I see how the cameraman is positioning his angle. I see where the acting is coming from. Is it a forced discussion, or is it a forced dialogue or lines? Is it pure flow? Is this scene the exact same continuity as the scene before? I was watching Deliverance the other night, and I noticed that they were running the rapids on a river, and there was one shot in which John Voight was in his canoe, and he was traveling fast, and he had a hat on. And then they cut to Burt Reynolds or whatever the case was, and he was whooping and the whole thing. And then they switched back to John Voight, and the same scene, he had no hat on. so you notice these little subtleties as you become more alert. And I'm sure the average person would never see anything like that. I'm watching, somebody climb a mountain. The cameraman is above the guy climbing the mountain, and you're seeing this incredibly difficult thing. He's got to be above this guy, on the mountain.
I
So,
see that.
you see the entire picture of what's going on, So
Now we have drones.
yeah, no, we have
So
drones, but
it's
we
even-
didn't back then. Yeah.
So
So
we
it's
got
all
more
beautiful stuff. But I love movies. Movies have taught me as much as books have taught me in every way. So I'm a big movie buff. At certain times I was probably seeing 1 to 2 movies a week in the theaters. So
What's
not now,
your
but
favorite? What's your favorite awakening movie that you think brings people? Like, I've had books for years I told people to read, like new students, or
well, I have favorite movies. The Ten Commandments was a great movie, and it always will be, with Charlton Heston. But then I love movies like The Princess Bride. I love movies like Begin Again. I love movies about It Was a Great Life. I love movies like, what other movies? I see so many of them, it's hard to do. Recently, I saw a movie called Mojave. I really like that.
have you seen Lucifer?
No.
It's a
Where-
streaming on Netflix. I had resistance to seeing it because of old belief systems and stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to focus on Lucifer. It is the best breakthrough show. It's funny as can be. He's the devil who quits hell. I'm done with this. And he's rich and he's good looking and
he's helpful.
And he doesn't understand humans. They're just their consciousness. He doesn't understand emotions. You'd love it, Harrison. He doesn't understand emotions or consciousness. It's
on Netflix?
Yeah, it's on Netflix. It used to be on something else, CBS or somebody, and it got canceled. And then they had such a backwash of people wanting it that Netflix took it over for a couple of years or a year, and then they canceled it again, and then they had a backwash, so they made another 2 seasons. So
cool.
It's a great show.
Well,
and one of is called Lucifer, and then there's another one, Dogma. Oh my God! If you have any religious beliefs, Dogma will bring them up. It's an old show.
That's on Netflix too, Lisa?
I don't know where it is. It's like 5 years ago or something, but Dogma is another one of those that just breaks apart a lot of I went to a Catholic, I was raised a Baptist, Lutheran, and then Baptist. And then I went to a Catholic all nuns, all girls school. They had to let me in because I was a girl, and it was the year that they are a non-Catholic, and it was the year that they had diversity. And so my sister and I were the only non-Catholics in there. And then I ended up studying all these religions. I married a Jewish guy, and then I started waking up. So I had this huge religion background, but I didn't get stuck in any of them. But I had some of the stuff from hell and damnation, fire, and you're going to burn in hell and damnation stuff that I had to clear.
That's the Baptist part,
the
right?
Baptist part, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's once you understand that stuff traps people in boxes of right and wrong, and judgment, then once you're outside of that box, life is so much more fun because you're not judging you and you're not judging others.
Religion is about controlling behavior. So most religion is about controlling behavior. Not that it doesn't start from a good place, but it starts from a spiritual principle, but it gets corrupted with people in the interim, and it's about behavior and controlling behavior, which then becomes something that is detrimental or at least diminishing to a lot of other people and very judgmental and divisive. The Spirit doesn't have that. Spirit has no religion. It has simply the principles of what is really makes us what we are. And
Yeah, well, religion's created by human minds.
yeah,
And so they're just doing it at the level that they can do it at the time. And so
yeah.
I don't judge it because it's all part of the journey.
Well, yeah,
Unless you get stuck in it, you can get stuck in anything. But
that's right.
as you keep moving to the next level, you can let that stuff go and just consider it part of the journey and take what you like and what brought you joy and just leave the rest.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that have left the confines of religion in multiple different kinds of churches, from the Mormon to the Jehovah's Witnesses to this, to that, to whatever the case may be, and come into much more satisfying lives because they felt constricted and they felt hypocrisy and they felt all kinds of other things that went on in their worlds of religions. So somebody said he just saw a screenplay. I didn't quite catch all that, but
he wrote it. Difference between religion and spirituality. Yeah, that's a good one to take on because it's different. I wish we had a genre. I think that's the right word. My stuff is not, I think spiritual is a iffy genre, and there's fantasy, there's science fiction,
Sure.
Historic. We need a new name.
Right.
Maybe awakening or.
Yeah. So, some sort of transitionary name or whatever that deals with principle as opposed to dogma and stuff. Yeah.
Like for screenplays, because it's just like a book.
There's no category for spiritual other than spiritual so far.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll put it in self-help, or they'll put it in religion. We're bringing in new concepts. And so sometimes we have to create new words.
A lot of films and production companies have titles about what they do, like Break-thru and like Orion and stuff like that. That these kinds of films or those kinds of films are produced here. I forgot. I just noticed a couple of names of this kind of film or that kind of film is under this production title. Whatever we choose to do, the clarity attracts somebody, and especially at the film level. So it attracts somebody, and most activities are directly connected to the survival level. And in the film industry, the biggest genre is the hero's journey. Who kicks the most amount of butt? So, and who can kick the most amount of butt? And how is the rebel go through the forces of adversity that they experience? The drama is where the film industry lives. The absence of drama is where spirituality lives,
But people don't want to go see that. It's like, I don't really want to put really dark stuff in my movie, but I did go through some dark stuff to get away.
That's okay because it takes you on a journey, right? So,
yeah.
But here's the other thing is that when you're dense, you need friction to create energy.
I'm going to go call Forbes real quick and I'll leave you on for a sec, okay? While I do.
Yeah, when you're dense, you need friction to create energy. Two rocks coming together, hitting off each other sends a spark to create a flame. And when you're in dense places in up to the third dimension, you need some sort of friction to create energy because you don't have your own. So in the fourth dimension and above the fourth dimension, you're generating your own light, you're generating your own energy, and you're recognizing that you're generating that. In other words, beneath the fourth dimension, you need an enemy to keep you going and keep you motivated. You need something to be against. And in fact, whatever you're against is the fastest way to rise to fame. You take on a big enemy and you rise to fame very quickly. In the upper dimensions, you don't need enemies because you're generating energy of your own, and so you're bringing, and then other people see you as an enemy oftentimes. John Lennon said, when the higher you get or the more evolved you get, the more real you get, the more unreal everybody else gets. So that's a whole other thing. So did you contact Forbes?
Her mailbox is full.
Oh, well, you can text it. You can text it. Yeah.
So you hang out for a while?
If you want me to, sure. I have about have another 15, 20 minutes or whatever, if you
That's
guys want to
great.
do that.
Um,
So when does
So
Kimberly come on? Do you know?
Huh?
When does Kimberly come on? Is she coming on after
After
Forbes?
Yeah. Time slots.
Harrison,
1 Pacific Standard.
yeah,
this is
Kimberly.
Ben. You can see me now. I turned my camera on. Okay. I was
I can see.
Yes. There's so much to unpack through all of what you said, but I think one element of the gift of what you said was the simplicity of the first, second, third, and fourth. If we have a moment, if you could tell them what I just told them, if you could go through the 1, 2, 3, 4, just lightly,
Okay.
so I can fill in some gaps. I'm sure some other people were drinking off the richness of that clarity.
We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. That's the first thing. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And that's the foundation for most everything. We don't get in this world what we want. We get in this world what we are. And as we come through the birth canal, we are given an amnesia. The omnipotence of who we are gets squeezed out through the birth canal so that we can focus in this one plane, because that's our decision to focus in this particular plane. In a total awareness, we don't have to focus on one thing, because simultaneously we see many things and have access to everything. So as you come through the birth canal, the first thing that happens is you're in a consciousness where you are close to source, and so everything is taken care of for you. So it's about my needs, my wants, my desires, like a baby. A baby gets whatever it happens to need. If it cries, somebody shows up to comfort it. If it's hungry, somebody shows up to give it food. If it's angry, somebody shows up to soothe it. So all these things happen in the first dimension, but it's all about the me. And they don't know anything different. They don't even separate that you're something different than they are until you start giving it a name and start telling them that they are this and we are that. So they don't know that difference. So it's about the me, because in the upper dimension, source takes care of everything because it's simultaneous with everything. The second dimension is where in mathematics, you're a line, right? So you are a bunch of points. The me is next to something. So you can see what's on the right-hand side of you or the left-hand side. You can't see all, and you can't see in all directions. You can only see what's on either side of you. So that's what we call duality. And that's where most people live, in the duality. They see what's this side and what's that side. What is this and what's the opposite of that? And in that place, we're taught a lot of things that are very uninspiring. In fact, the opposite of uninspiring. They're very dull, they're very repetitive, they're very boring, and they're very negative. And they need friction in order to generate energy. So friction generates energy, and then light generates energy. Something has to burn to generate energy. So the sun burns, it generates all this light. We burn internally when we have certain kinds of ambitions. We burn, and so we generate light. We are burning with a desire. So we generate light. The second dimension is in the duality, so we're needing the friction to generate the light. The third dimension is where we start to act on what is on either side of us. And we have, again, we are able to see life in a perspective, a little bit of a perspective. In the third dimension, you can only go to the end of your life forward or the beginning of your life backward. So you're confined to this skin, to this density of memory. And in that situation, you understand anything only from the experiences you have. In the fourth dimension and above, you can understand from other people's experiences. You become flexible. You are not in the space where you're confined to what is your experience as an experience. You're confined to the knowledge and the processing of all experience. So in the unenlightened state, you are in one dimension. You only see one thing at a time. You can only see one thing. In a much more enlightened state, you have this incredible flexibility to see many different perspectives on every single thing that's said. Tony Robbins is like an encyclopedia. All he sees is 4 million things going by his mind at one particular time, and he can just spew out everything that's different about any different thing from any direction. So that's a skill, but that's because because he sees all the different opportunities and principles and dimensions of every single meaning of every single thing he says. I see multiple meanings in everything that happens. So I just happen to choose one at a given point, which resonates with the way that I like or feel. So those are the 3 dimensions there. The 4th dimension is the dimension of time. That's where you are then putting what you are into some form of use. And then how do we put that into use to serve other people? Up until the 3rd dimension, you're not really serving others, you're serving yourself. In the 4th dimension, you begin to, how do I use my time to make a difference? How do I get the most functionality out of what I do? Again, the greater the success level or the greater the evolved level, the smaller the increments of time are for you in terms of interaction. And you want to make a case to the President of the United States, he gives you 15 minutes to come in and tell him what your thing is, and you leave because he's a busy guy. He's got other shit to take care of. But the guy who's on the street, homeless, who's hardly making a living, they've got time they got to fill, and they don't know what to do with it. They can't think of it. They're not creative because their mind and their heart is filled with problems, difficulties, and conflicts. They're in turmoil. So you only leave the turmoil out of the 4th dimension. Up until you're in the 4th dimension, you're in some form of turmoil. After that, the turmoil dissolves again, and you're in perspective. You go vertical. Remember that the higher frequency always dissolves the lower frequency. Again, so my example was and is, if you're happy, you don't think about being sad. If you're wealthy, you don't think about being poverty, being poor. It doesn't even occur to you. You can observe it in other people, but it doesn't occur to you as being part of you. So you've already bypassed that experience. So in the 4th dimension, we start to move into those perspectives where we begin to see the frequency. And then when we break through the light dimension, we see all the things that have not been seen before, that we have had any sort of connection with, or that any other people are bringing to us. So the visual is very different than what is, in the lower dimensions. And again, but the beauty of it is you can be in the 4th dimension and you're actually in the light dimension, because you can't know what dimension you're in unless you can see it from a perspective higher than the dimension. So no matter what dimension you think, you're in the one above it, however you identify.
I want to show you my painting. And Forbes, there was a time between the time difference, so I don't know if she's going to be coming on. But
did you get that?
This is one of my paintings. Look.
That help?
Yes, I liked.
Okay, good. Okay, let me see your painting, Lisa.
So I was explaining the dimensions, right?
Yeah.
And how on the bottom dimension you feel like crap, right?
Yeah.
And then
you feel like because you're stuck in the stuff.
Yeah, and then shamanistic, and then you move up.
Yeah.
To the higher dimensions, and life gets so much easier. I have a lot of paintings I've done like this because I wanted to explain to people, and sometimes words don't explain things as easy as.
Yeah. I think every movie has some level of the evolution of other people. Even the Spider-Man movies, the Avengers, the superhero things, they all have that level of infusing the transformation. And that's what good literature is about. That's what good stories are about. That's what good interactions are about. So the more we are able to see the transition and help the transition move, the easier everything becomes for us and becomes for everybody around us.
It's God puts in these little tidbits, even if the people aren't conscious of it. The screenwriters, the direct, they might not be conscious they're putting the tidbits in the movies. But when you're awake, you see the movie and you go, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool.
I know what he was thinking and what he was experiencing at that time. Sci-fi movies are great for that. They are done by, most great sci-fi movies or good sci-fi movies are done by psychics. Yeah. That they're done by psychics who have experienced other realms, and so they build that into their stories. And I
Did you
love
see
that.
Soul? Didn't Disney's Soul movie?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
It's brand new. It's on Disney and it's animated and it's amazing about the soul and how the
Cool.
soul dives into earth, dives into incarnation, and actually
Yeah.
how if they get heavy, they get all black, but they're little
Yeah.
light beings, and that's on Disney. So I know we got a market right now.
It's amazing. I saw it. It's
Yeah.
really very powerful. And it's, I don't know how, if they're trying to sell it to kids, how they're going to understand
They'll
at that
probably
level.
just know it already.
Yeah.
Kids just
Hopefully.
But they don't, you don't have to understand, you don't have to understand things in the way that I intellectualize things, because the truth penetrates your experience no matter what. So it penetrates whether you know it or not, and your subconscious understands it because your subconscious is God. Your subconscious is in the realm of God, so it understands whatever is being said. Whether your conscious acts on it, that's another thing. The action has to be in alignment. So when you begin to act on something, you have to deal with the three levels of your consciousness: your conscious, your subconscious, and your superconscious. But anything that you experience that has the element of truth to it, absolute truth, where it is a spiritual experience, it penetrates into your subconscious, whether you know it or not. And as you go through life, those are references for your subconscious to program your behavior. And then when you awaken, when you go through the canal of breakthrough, basically, then that all becomes very literally conscious to you. You can see it in totalities. So like when a great musician composes a piece of music, he doesn't compose one instrument, he composes the orchestra, and then he composes this horn section, a whole series of different, and then he composes the violin section, a whole series of other things, so on. So he takes blocks of it. Your subconscious does the same thing. It takes blocks of information to use in your experience for you. And that's how it works. So the how of how things work is really important. Those are the missing elements that help you do the breakthrough as you begin to learn through the inspirational portion of it. You break through, as I told you, the three ways. Everything is a derivative of those three ways: self-image, belief, shock, or inspiration. Those are the only ways we change. There's no other thing. Everything else is some form of that.
Once you get so awake, though, you start flowing.
It's all flow. It's especially flow after the fourth dimension. When you come into light, it's all flow because there's no more density. So you are light and you experience yourself as light. So when you use the word illumination, that illumination is coming from you, not to you. You're not seeing things because it's out there. There's no out there, there's only in here. All of everything is in here. So the universe exists within you just as you exist within the universe, and it's an interwoven infinity. 8 is an infinite Mobius strip where it goes in and out the same, but it's the same thing. And so you come into that infinite Mobius strip. So
A long time ago, I'm sorry, Harrison. A long time ago, I learned when it was probably about 95 when I was waking up. My mind went, and you reminded me of this when you were talking about the dimensions and the levels. My mind went from a tape player, like, oh, I did this yesterday and before, to a CD. So it went to like events.
Yeah.
Like I live in the now and I'm in events. And I can grasp what I did yesterday, but I don't have the linear timeline anymore.
Yeah.
It's events. This happened there. And I can just jump to the event, even if it's a past life, without the steps in between.
That's the knowing, right? That's the access. The intuitive portion of that, the sixth sense of that, is where you have full access to that without having to go to the steps of learning. It's just a knowing.
Oh, it's above linear. So that's what you're talking about, between the linear time.
Linear.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no time. And when you come into the transcendence of that, where space-time wave collapses into the now, when there's only the now, and you have no other experience, then you have access to everything that exists. So you are the God force in the same way that a drop out of the ocean or a bucket of the ocean has all the same capabilities and all the same elements of the entire ocean. You have all the same elements of the knowingness of God or the universe, the intelligence and the energy of that situation. So your energy just expands and expands with every single just drop of interaction or connection with anything else, because now you are the same and 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 you are the same. So
But you have a broader perspective.
everybody's perspective is absorbed within you as you make that interaction. Yes.
It's really cool because when you go way up and you're God and you're doing this stuff, it's like, I'm along for the ride, but I'm not. But and I know it's me. It's still me, but I'm big. It's a whole different level of awareness. It's
Yeah, and it's fun. The interactivity of energy is like a kind of it's like being a master basketball player. You're running down the court, you're dunking baskets, you're running down the other way, and you're protecting baskets, and you're dunking and protecting. So it's this game of what's really cool. So you see all the moves and you see the audience and what works and what doesn't work, and you're feeling yourself as being the energy of the game, and that's
awesome.
the beauty of it. So in all of that, the three elements that is central to all these things are truth, beauty, and love. Everything is some form, every part of God is some form of those three things: truth, beauty, and love. And those are the only ways to God. Everything, again, is some derivative of that, but everything is true. You can get there through truth, you can get there through beauty, or you can get there through love. Everything else is some separation. So,
Yeah.
but those things are not separate.
And we're playing.
And we play, and we just play. We just play the game, whatever that game is. So,
Well, we're playing the game of being humans.
yeah, that's right. And 8 billion hearts coming from one flame, and to reunite with one flame.
Yeah. Thank you, Harrison. This is awesome. Hey, you've been amazing.
I wish you all the magic. I wish you all the magic of enlightenment.
Thank you, Harrison. It was amazing. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay.
Blessings.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, from Ben, thank you. You're welcome, Ben, and you're welcome, all of you guys. Thanks for having me, Lisa.